In today's video, I'd like to raise a proposal. Should Jake Paul fight in the UFC? Should Jake Paul train in mixed martial arts? Now, why are we proposing this? Well, it's simple. It has been discussed by him that he was considered training in MMA. We know about his high school wrestling credentials. And of course, he's been fighting some UFC fighters, including Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley. Of course, wrestlers. But should Jake Paul fight in MMA? That's the question. Now, you're assuming it's MMA. You're assuming he's going to want to fight in the UFC under Dana White's promotion. Now, we have a couple of issues with that initially, and that's going to stem from his beef with Dana White. Of course, a lot of it having to do with fighter pay. Obviously, Dana White bet against him or said he would bet against him. I don't think he actually did. But there's a lot of issues there that we would have to go through to see a potential UFC matchup. And then also comes with who's he going to fight. We have seen him call out the three biggest stars in the sport, Conor McGregor, Masvidal, and Nate Diaz. So he's already called out the three biggest stars in the UFC. But we've also seen him create types of beef with guys like Daniel Cormier, who Daniel said he would actually move down to 205 pounds, the light heavyweight division, to fight Jake Paul, which is actually a lot coming from him, considering the fact that he moved up to heavyweight because he didn't want to go through that tough weight cut anymore. We saw him struggle with making that 205-pound division. So that's a lot, especially considering he is 40 plus. He mentioned the back issues, but he did say that he would fight him, and it is very interesting. So now, what are the reasons that Jake Paul does it? He doesn't really have any reasons. I think the biggest thing, his biggest reasoning behind this is he has this thing where he seems like he feels he has to prove the haters wrong. He has people saying, oh, fight in mixed martial arts. You're fighting boxers. You're fighting mixed martial artists in boxing. Why won't you fight them in MMA? He feels like he's having pressure on him. That's ultimately raising it. There's a lot of people talking about it. And for whatever reason, I do feel like he has this thing where he feels like he has to prove everybody wrong. And you've seen that multitude of times throughout his career, people questioning the validity of the knockouts. And you have all that. Now, where's he going to train? That's another good point, because he's mentioned that he has a door open with Javier Mendez at AKA American Kickboxing Academy. But guess who's one of the head trainers there? It's a guy by the name of Daniel Cormier, who, once again, he might not be there all that as much as he would, but it is still a potential issue and something that could be interesting to see, those interactions between the two. But what are the reasons that he is going to fight? What's in the benefit for him, Jake Paul, in this scenario? He's fighting in boxing. He's going to make more money in boxing. I think that's a given. Definitely would make more money in boxing. I feel like there's less risk for injury in boxing. Training in MMA, when he's learning all that, it's going to take a while for him to learn, so he's going to have to take a layoff. He's not going to be able to fight as often as he is right now, which is a pretty heavy pace. He's fighting 3 times a year, and he's not going to be able to do that. He's going to have to take like a year, potentially even longer, to learn how to train, especially if he's hopping into the highest of competition. We also don't really expect him to take any kind of warm-up fight, especially with the guys that he's been calling out, the guys that want to fight him, guys like Masvidal. He might not be taking a warm-up fight. And also, where does he fit into all of this? Is Jake Paul a main event UFC fighter? Is he his own card type of fighter, McGregor type, where he's not fighting for a title, but it's still going to be a main event, guys like Diaz? Is he that? I don't know that Dana White gives him that, even if this scenario happens, simply because I see him more as a main card type of a guy. Under a couple of championship fights. It's kind of like the CM Punk role. I know he's a lot different than that, but that same role type as far as it's concerned. Now, as far as the business aspect of it, I actually think this definitely could work. I think Dana White would be open to it. It would make his company a lot of business. It would sell out an arena, most certainly. And I also think Dana White would like to see Jake Paul get destroyed by an MMA fighter. But business-wise, I do think it works. Jake Paul is not going to want to fight anything other than the main event, I do believe. So that would be interesting to see how that party is going to develop. But overall, I just don't think it's that of his best interest, unless he can somehow negotiate himself a huge contract, which we've seen in the UFC is not going to be the case unless your name is Conor McGregor, and even Jake Paul is not going to pull Conor McGregor type numbers. So right there, I just don't see it happening. But I would certainly be interested in a fight. I know I would buy the fight. I know a lot of you would buy the fight. It would definitely be interesting to watch. Now, again, the opponent is interesting. Also, the weight class is interesting. What is he going to fight? I think he's fighting at 190 right now. Is he going to go up to 205? Fight with those big boys? Or is he going to maybe cut down to 185 and fight at the middleweight division? I think that is an interesting point. Where would he actually fight? I feel like 185 he would definitely rather fight at. Obviously, Masvidal's fighting at 170. Is Jake Paul going to go down to 170? I don't think that's very likely. I think Jake Paul actually walks around 205, even higher. So the likelihood of him going down to 170, I think they would have to actually meet at 185 at the lowest, or fight at 205. I know he's not going to fight Daniel Cormier because he would get mauled on the ground. There's no doubt about that. However much he learns in 1 year is not going to amount to anything compared to that guy, and really anybody in the UFC at this point. But I still think it is interesting, and he's doing the right thing in engaging in all of this UFC MMA talk. Even if he decides not to fight, if he decides just to train, people would be interested in it. It would be interesting to see how his skills could develop if he actually were able to get that deal done. We're able to start training at AKA. I think that's a very interesting point. How would that actually work? Would he be able to develop a ground game? Would he be able to... We know his striking is pretty tight, but how is he going to look with 4-ounce gloves instead of 10-ounce gloves or whatever he's using now? It's a lot of interesting points in that aspect because we just don't know. So let me know what you guys would think, who he would fight. Again, I highly doubt he's going to happen with Masvidal first fight. It's just unlikely. It would be a mega fight. Dana White would be on page. Masvidal would be on page, but Jake Paul is more calling him out to box. He doesn't want to actually fight in MMA with him. I'm not doubting that he would fight somebody in MMA, but it would definitely be interesting to see what the matchup would look like, who you think an ideal matchup is. Again, is it going to be a ranked guy? I just don't really see it personally. You just can't learn those kinds of kicks. Jake Paul's never thrown a kick in his life. He can wrestle, he can throw punches, he can box, but it's a whole nother ball game. The weight cut's going to be probably a little bit more difficult. And yeah, man, it'll just definitely a lot of interesting points there. Let me know how you guys feel about the entire issue down below in the comments section. Let me know who you'd want to see him fight, if you want to see him fight, or if you want to see him continue to box. And that's going to do it for me. Peace. I'm out of here.